Hello, and good day, everyone! Welcome to Drakan the Gates Glitch Tutorial episode 81, where we are back here at Spiral Island, in which we're going to use its airport to be able to access the Bridal Hall with Rynn Alone. And that's the first thing we're going to discuss so far, as the different ways we can actually access the Bridal Hall with Rynn Alone. The first docking bay that we're going to discuss is something that we've already discussed back in the teaser video for episode 78. Where we basically use the tree over in front of us to be able to Rynn flight all the way to the Bridal Hall where the main entrance is. If you land on top of the tree and she's inside its branches like this, then when you Rynn Dash through the Bridal Hall, you are likely to be sucked down to the world platform and slide off to your doom. To glide safely across, you can either unequip your weapon and jump up to this invisible platform, or you can equip a weapon and jump in place repeatedly to have this invisible platform turned ceiling push Rynn outwards until she stops being pushed. It's amazing how just having a weapon equipped or not changes how this game's physics works. This way, Rynn should be high enough that she will avoid being pulled down and make her way to the Bridal Hall in style. However, if you find yourself nervous about how the world platform below you is going to treat you, you can switch to the menu glide by pressing select while still holding circle. You can let go of circle after you get the menu glide to work. This way you can save the game while in midair so that you don't lose progress, and then have Rynn harmlessly drop into the water below. Let's talk about accessing the Bridal Hall through 3 other routes. First, we'll use the third lowest tree on Spiral Island to access... Ow!
Arokh!
I need a band-aid!
As I was saying, we use this tree to access 2 of those routes, which are the upper level of the ferry docking bay and the Bridal Hall's loggia, located on the north side of the island. In fact, you can actually get to the loggia from the upper level easy enough via flight dashing, though if you want to do so vice versa, you'll need to jump on one of the trees protruding from the loggia to get Rynn high enough to make the trip. Now, to access the lower level of the ferry's docking bay, we will need to transfer our flight to either this griffin's nest or the closest islet of the Bridal Hall's main island. From these locations, we can use flight dashing to easily access the lower level. However, with the griffin's nest, if we Rynn Dash off over here, we can flight dash straight to the heart of the docking bay to trigger the cutscene for Rynn to take the ferry to the Flesh Mage's palace. Well, that's it for the Bridal Hall. Time to explore the Flesh Mage's palace in the next episode. Like, comment, subscribe, and as always, have a great... Sorry about that. There is just so much to talk about with the Bridal Hall, and I really would like to finish this first playthrough of the Glitch tutorial sooner rather than later. Alright, fine. Let's continue where we left off. Now that we've identified 4 different routes to the Bridal Hall, let's talk about infiltrating the Bridal Hall itself without needing Grotus' potion. We will start with the doors here in the docking bay. To clip through these doors, we can simply use Rynn's double jump just like we did in episode 79 to bypass them. Just remember 3 things. Look for Rynn's arms to draw back upon attempting Rynn's second jump, allow her to complete said animation before repeating, and be sure you're holding triangle when you press square. Otherwise, she'll die. First, let's deal with the doors on the lower level, and bypassing the one on our left leads us to the 4 soulless that would normally greet us with swords. If we came from the other direction, mind you. However, from here they won't react until we proceed a little further, not unlike the Growl in the Crystal Mines back in episode 37. With this, we can take a real close look at the character model of a soulless. Aside from its black, lifeless eyes,
Like a doll's eye.
the soulless remind me of the Shredder, with a severe case of atrophy. I wonder how he'd feel about being cloned as a common foot ninja. Aside from that, we can also trigger the fight by dealing the first blow. The fact that these 4 soulless always exist, and that hitting them triggers the djinn to appear, allowed me to use Arokh's fire breath to rout the enemies and advance to the ferry guy, skipping most of Stratos in my old speedrun attempts. However, this method is now outdated. Since we can clip through the doors with a double jump, we can park Arokh close to the other door on the lower level, clip through that door, talk with the guy, and then semi-clip through that door again to mount on Arokh and proceed with the rest of the speedrun as normal. This method is faster and more reliable once you master it, so give it a try if you haven't done so already. Who knows, maybe the desire to speedrun this game may manifest in you. Care to claim the world record for yourself? Have at it! That aside, there's nothing more to do with the Ferry Control Center for right now. So let's head back to the other door, and we'll come back to here later. After dispatching the soulless and the djinn, we can just exit out to our left, but that'd be boring. Let's make our way backwards to now trigger the Flesh Mage's telepathic message.
Come, my sweet bride. My faithful attendants will escort you.
Your attendants? You mean they were my escorts? I'm sorry. Continuing further up into the lounge, we'll open this door to the hallway leading to the Bridal Hall's loggia and upper level of the ferry docking bay, or the observation deck if you will. To progress the game further, as the developers intended, we'll still need to trigger and kill the Desert Lord and head up to the observation deck. Upon near completion of this area, before we kill the djinn that spawns, we want to kill him from this side because since we've already opened the door to the lounge, when he dies, it will close. But doors aren't really a problem anymore, so Also, props to Zera to being able to clip through doors with no effort on her part.
Congratulations, Zera.
Now let's talk about infiltrating from the observation deck's door. Aside from the door to the lounge being closed instead of opened, nothing is different from what we did earlier. So to avoid reiterating, let's take this opportunity to talk about what we can do with the observation deck after we kill the Desert Lord. 14 years ago, I discovered a shortcut using the ferry that pulls in. After dispatching the soulless, because we don't want to be pushed off, we make our way left. After the ship pulls in and begins to rotate, we're going to run off and land Rynn on the ferry's bowsprit. Once we survive the fall and don't fall off, we can either run to the center and advance to the Flesh Mage's palace, act as the bride's escort or guard, or ride the bowsprit like a true king of the pirates. Of course, nowadays we can just flight dash to the ship and land on the sail, which shockingly is a traversable platform. From here we can either drop down and do the three things that I mentioned, or we can ride the top of the mast like another famous pirate. If we choose to ride the ship, eventually the ship will come to a stop, followed by the bride blinking out of existence. However, that wording is now misleading because it turns out that the bride actually warps to a testing room left behind by the developers, and we can get there. Using Rynn's hair to tell when the ship stops, you have from the moment the ship stops until the moment the bride disappears to interact with her, which is about 6 seconds. When you interact with her during the 6 seconds window, you will be spirited away by her and dropped to your death. Horrifying when you think about it. Unfortunately, even at full health, you can't survive the fall, which means you'll need the Gameshark to negate the fall damage. Thankfully, I hear you can emulate the Gameshark codes on the PC, so those of you emulating the game can accomplish the same, though it's a bit programming heavy. Thankfully, Almar's Guides has a wonderful step-by-step guide to get the cheats to work if you haven't done so already. Those of us playing on the console will likely need to create a file for the game and input the codes for the cheats manually, as I think none of the versions of the Gameshark for PlayStation 2 has the cheats for Drakan the Ancient Gates included. Thankfully, my brother had already done the heavy work almost 20 years ago, so I didn't have to work for it this time. Hooray for me keeping those memory cards! Yay! If the cheats are not pre-installed in your Gameshark, you can thankfully use Almar's guide, yet again, to get the Gameshark codes, as well as the codes for Action Replay Max and Codebreaker. I'll leave a link in the description for the aforementioned pages. Cheating devices aside, using the cheat code for infinite life will allow us to survive the fall, and we can explore the test room that no one, aside from the developers, has accessed before. There are only a few things of note in this room. The first two are two bouquets of flowers with particle effects and animations. Both the bouquets oscillate 360 degrees clockwise and then counterclockwise, with the one closest to the center having an added animation of rising and descending after each oscillation. We can even have fun decorating them with arrows as they spin around. But sadly, Rynn can't jump on them, so we can't ride them for fun. Those of you who've seen my video about the discovery of this test room will notice that the colors of the particles have switched. In that video, the pink particles were with the centermost bouquet, but they are white now. After further digging, I discovered that they are related to the particles in the ferry docking bay. Using the particles that decorate the invisible bridge as a reference point, I figured out that this section of particles pertains to the centermost bouquet of flowers. If the particles are white, then they will be white like this. If they are pink, then the opposite will happen. Also, it seems to be random even after you save and load the game, so if you have a particular preference as to which bouquet generates which colors, then keep loading back until you get the desired outcome. As for the static object of Grotus' potion, whether I generate, possess, or use the actual Grotus' potion, this object is unaffected and remains static. As far as I can tell, it's its own copy and is not associated with anything in the game. But in terms of shape, it is indeed Grotus' potion. We can shoot it, strike it, or even jump on it, but we can't pick it up. And that's really all there is to it. That leaves us with this fully functional character model of the bride. Aside from the fact that being far enough away reveals that the bride is a reskin of a bridesmaid, this character model is actually related to the bride that is generated atop of the ferry that's ready to depart after killing our own escorts. Again, sorry about that. And exiting the last door of the Bridal Hall's main building. So let's take this opportunity to talk about the ferry and how it functions differently from the one we've been using, as well as how they can interact with each other when you generate both. For simpler terms, we will refer to these as the Upper Ferry and the Lower Ferry based on where they were triggered. First off, the Lower Ferry is much faster than the Upper Ferry. Excluding the entry speed of the Upper Ferry that almost rivals Arokh's normal flight speed, the Lower Ferry's departure speed is much faster than the Upper Ferry's. Using the flight dashing to compare, or as best as I can show you, we can't even hope to catch up to this one. While we can do a minor reenactment of the Great Train Robbery with the Upper Ferry. Except it's a ferry instead of a train, and the Rynn doesn't need a horse. Second, the distance traveled by the Lower Ferry is about half of the Upper Ferry's. Overlapping the map gives us a good scope of the difference. Heck, you can still see the Lower Ferry from the docking bay when it's finished moving, which you're not supposed to? But if we sequence broke the game from the lower level door using Arokh, we won't trigger the white fog effect that accompanies you when you exit the Bridal Hall using any route aside from the main entrance. More on this fog effect later. Third, the Upper Ferry maintains a horizontal route while the Lower Ferry subtly ascends as it moves forward. Flight dashing reveals that the Upper Ferry maintains the same level with the Bridal Hall's dock, while the Lower Ferry ascends and obtains the same height as the docks inside the entrance to the Flesh Mage's Palace. Speaking of the entrance to the Flesh Mage's Palace, there always seems to be a ferry docked there before we would explore the Bridal Hall. However, when we trigger either the Upper or Lower Ferry and fly over there, we can see that the ferry is gone and what is left behind is the Gangplank for the ferry in plain view. We can walk on it, of course, but aside from that, nothing else of note. But the Gamplank's position does explain where the Gangplank came from after the ferry cutscene. But where does this Gangplank go during the cutscene? My first guess would be that the ferry used in the cutscene is unique, in which the Gangplank moves with it while inside it. However, when we breach into the entrance of the Necropolis' docks, which the Flesh Mage's Palace is in Necropolis, I just never bothered to pay its real name any mind, the Gangplank seems to be slightly on the long side. So I don't think it moves with the ferry in the cutscene, or the Cutscene Ferry if you will, unless the ferry is scaled up or the Gangplank is scaled down for the cutscene. Maybe it temporarily goes to another test room during the cutscene? I don't really know. If only I could boundary break with the camera, then we can know for sure if the Gangplank does move inside the Cutscene Ferry, or if it is maybe teleported away temporarily to a possible test room. Now, the Cutscene Ferry is in fact unrelated to the ferry that is docked since the start of Stratos, because if we activate the Cutscene Ferry first, and later produce another ferry via any of the 3 routes, the Cutscene Ferry will remain docked, and we'll end up with 2 ferries. So, since the Cutscene Ferry is separate, I wonder if its asset was lying in wait in a test room somewhere outside the map for us to activate the cutscene. Hypothetical tangents aside though, let's return to talking more about the Lower Ferry and tackle how we can board it. Given that, under normal circumstances, boarding the Lower Ferry is a pipe dream because it leaves before we can do much of anything. However, even though there is such a limited window to even hope to board this ferry, it is doable if we use time slow with the Rynn Dash. Unfortunately, the Rynn Dash is a major pain to do when time slow is active because it messes with the input timing and outright makes certain applications useless, like clipping through doors. So I'd normally recommend avoiding the use of the Rynn Dash with time slow, but we gotta bite the bullet in this scenario. There are 3 ways to board, 2 of them utilizes Arokh and 1 with Rynn Alone. So let's discuss the Rynn Alone method first. After taking care of the enemies here, we will first cast time slow and then cast an offensive spell like Fireball. From here, we will roll underneath the door to get a head start and run to as close to the edge as possible to transition into a magic menu glide. We will use it to make our way to the ferry and land on its guardrail as it departs. As for the other 2 methods, both will utilize Arokh to kill the enemies from the outside. As the last one's about to die from burn damage, move away from the door so we don't accidentally open it too soon. Now save the game as a test of trial and error awaits. First, we are going to need to get off Arokh and activate time slow. Then we will equip our shield and sword and immediately get onto Arokh. This way we will be ready to use flight dashing upon dismount. We will then approach the door to open it and quickly fly off to the northern ledge of the observation deck. Turning Arokh around upon landing will set Rynn up in the perfect position to flight dash towards the ferry after dismount. However, the ferry moves too fast for us to actually make it down to the ferry's deck. So we are stuck up here until the ship stops. We can't use the Who teleport for obvious reasons, and we can't flight dash from the lower level because of what was aforementioned about the Lower Ferry's inclined flight path. This is where method number 3 comes into play. But we need to do some additional prep work first. After deploying the invisible bridge from the Ferry Control Center, we will do something that I've been trying to hold off for later, but I might as well show it now, which is to get Arokh on the ship. We can't simply walk onto the invisible platform with Arokh, so we will need to make our way over here to where Arokh can fly, and then land him on the invisible platform. We will then walk Arokh to the ferry and clip him through the gap in the guardrails using strafe controls as needed. Once when Arokh changes to a brighter hue, we can freely walk on the ship. We will position Arokh to about here and then dismount. We need to activate the cutscene to get rid of its trigger, but instead of having Rynn ferried all the way to the Necropolis' docks and flight dash all the way back, we will do what we did at the start of episode 79, which is to have her mount just before the cutscene activates. This way, Rynn will stay here and save us about 2.5 minutes worth of backtracking. With the cutscene now gone, we can use the invisible bridge to board. Everything is the same from here on out with the exception of staying on the lower level, and we just simply dismount Arokh to board. In fact, you won't need time slow to accomplish this third option if you're just dismounting, but time slow does make it a little easier. Just be careful when using time slow with Arokh, as his recoils from his collisions with objects and boundaries are greatly exaggerated, enhancing our ability to clip through walls, but we want to board the ferry, so be careful, good luck, and we'll come back to this later. Now, if we expedite the process of option 3 with time slow, we can have Arokh board the lower ferry and ride it. Sort of. He doesn't move with the ship, so if we want to keep him on, we will need to walk Arokh to the front of the ship and keep moving him forward until the ship comes to a stop. Heck, we can do this with the upper ferry without the use of time slow, though boarding is kind of weird. We can't board the upper ferry with Arokh when the ship fully turns around, and there is now a gap between the Gangplank and the ferry. However, the gap is bridged when it arrives, so we just need to have Arokh ready to board as it flies in, await the bride to get into position, and then squalala, we're off! This time, the ship doesn't move faster than Arokh, but you can still lose him, so please don't dismount until the ship stops. Now, back to boarding the lower ferry with Rynn. Let's talk about the lower ferry's bride. Unlike the bride of the upper ferry that has dialogue, this one doesn't, which means you can't use her to access the hidden test room. Not only is she without dialogue, she will also seep down into the ferry when it stops. But if we look closely with time slow, she actually disappears a few frames before she is fully submerged. The reason being is that, just like with the Upper Ferry's bride, she too is teleported to the same hidden test room that we were exploring earlier. So if we spawn the Lower Ferry's bride first, and then spawn the Upper Ferry's bride next, and use said bride to teleport to the test room, we can see that the bride, at the ground level of the test room, has moved forward from her original position and became smaller in comparison from before. This shows that both the bride models in this test room are tied to the brides of the two ferries. Now, where is the Upper Ferry bride that dropped us here in the first place? Well, to answer that, we must become aware that we are surrounded by outer limits. So despite my best efforts, we can't leave this room. I wish I could, then we could go to other potential test rooms, but alas. Since we are surrounded by outer limits, we can use the infinite climb glitch to ascend to the heavens and go see that bride that ferried us to our death on our first visit. In less than a minute, we will be up with the bride in question, and when we look down, no, I ain't surviving that without cheats. Why did the developers have to put her all the way up here in the first place? Why? As a bonus piece of information, an hour in and we'll see that the clouds are separate from the rest of the sky backdrop, as the sun has put some distance between them from where they were before. If I wait probably another hour or two, I can probably make a cloud ring, not unlike I did in episode 19 with the infinite climb. But I ain't waiting that long just to do that. That aside, we're done exploring this test room, but we may come back here later, so we'll see. Let's head back to the Bridal Hall's observation deck and talk about a few additional tidbits about the ferries before we can begin to move on to discuss something else that doesn't have to do with the ferries and their brides. So, if we spawn the Upper Ferry first, and then the Lower Ferry soon afterwards, the Upper Ferry's ferry model is temporarily borrowed by the Lower Ferries. So as it departs, our poor Upper Ferry Bride must make the journey without the ship. And she can. Not only that, but once the Lower Ferry finishes its route, the ferry itself goes back to the Upper Ferry's bride and moves on with her as if it was there all along. In fact, when I was exploring how to board the Lower Ferry and trying to figure out if I could talk to its bride, after the bride sunk down below, the ferry then disappeared and landed me on the Upper Ferry. It quite frankly caught me off guard, so I messed up going to the test room during this attempt. But I guess if you time the overlap just right, we can actually end up riding both ferries in one single trip. But honestly, we have a being that can float through the air, summon a ship to their person, and teleport unsuspecting persons to an isolated space only to drop them to their death. We have something that I think is more terrifying than the Flesh Mage. In any case, while the ship is moving, the back wall is intangible, so we can go through it. Just be mindful that there is an invisible ledge, but the ledge is small, so careful not to fall off if you're trying to look around. Using clone on the ship will have the clone stay in place in the air where it was cast. So, if we have any dragons pursuing us, we can have them be occupied with our clone as we make our getaway. With a series of platforming, we can actually explore the entire ship from bottom to top and vice versa. The platforming is a bit weird on top of the sail in particular. The invisible boundaries extend past to what is visible, and there are even big, thick invisible blocks that we can use for platforming. With this extensive knowledge, we can actually hunt those dragons effectively with magic and archery, utilizing every crevice of the ship to evade attacks and fight back. We just need to pay attention to our surroundings and find our footing! That's it for part 1 of episode 81, and sorry that I have to be doing a two-parter here. There just ended up being so much to talk about, and it's no joke. Oh, the sheer amount of things that I've been discovering and have uploaded, especially regarding the test rooms, but I never thought I would be talking so much in regards to the ferries and the things you can do with the ferries, and what if this, what if that, so many what ifs that branched off to, basically we diverted from doing our whole entire route going from in there, then talk about everything up here, to hopefully get up to talk about there, which we didn't talk about the loggia. We didn't get back to it, but we'll do that in part 2. There are some things I need to discuss that are here as well, which in regards I'm going to try to focus on doing for Rynn for the most part, and then talk about Arokh and everything that he can pretty much do regards to the Bridal Hall after that. But that is going to be all in part 2, and with that being said, like, comment, subscribe, and as always, have a great life, everyone, and happy Halloween!
Arokh! Arokh! Where's that dragon when you need him? Soon. No!
I'm so happy for you.